Hello everyone, thank you so much for coming to our annual fundraiser this year. For all of you who we have seen and met before, welcome back. And for all of the new faces, it's wonderful to see you and thank you for joining us. There are quite a lot of new faces this year, which is really exciting, so thank you. Up first, as always, we have our founder, Dr. Laura Lemle, who will be introducing herself and some other stuff tonight.
Thank you, Samantha. And thank you, everybody, for attending. I just want to reiterate, it's great to see everybody, and it's great to see all these new faces. It really means a lot to us. This has been a very special year for the NVLD project. Spearheaded by Dr. Prudence Fisher from Columbia University Medical Center, we can see the light at the end of the tunnel for the resubmission of NVLD, renamed Developmental Visual Spatial Disorder, to get recognized as a formal disorder by the DSM committee. Ferkauf Graduate School has opened the Lemle Clinic, the first clinic of its kind treating and assessing children, adolescents, and adults with NVLD. Importantly, awareness of NVLD has exploded after the Waltz family were open about their son Gus having NVLD, as well as ADHD and generalized anxiety disorder. After Gus expressed his uninhibited admiration and love for his father at the Democratic National Convention, social media and many news outlets wrote articles about NVLD, which has helped this little-known disorder get much-needed attention. Lastly, we have breaking news. Our lead research scientist, Dr. Amy Margolis, after many years at Columbia, has left to become Senior Research Fellow and Head of Strategy, Learning and Development at Child Mind Institute. She is also a full professor now at The Ohio State University. I am very excited to say that research will continue in NVLD at CMI under Dr. Margolis' directive. Adding to this exciting news, the NVLD project and CMI are partnering together. Everybody enjoy the evening. Thank you.
Next, you will hear from a couple of our educational and research partners. First, you will hear from Dr. Jeremy Veenstra-VanderWeele from Columbia, Dr. Amy Margolis from Child Mind Institute in The Ohio State University, and Dr. Leslie Halpern from Ferkauf Graduate School of Psychology at Yeshiva University.
Sorry, raise this a little bit. Thank you, Samantha. We spent about 20 minutes working on the pronunciation of my last name, and it was perfect. Veenstra-VanderWeele is usually a challenge. I have the privilege to direct child and adolescent psychiatry at Columbia University and New York State Psychiatric Institute, and really the privilege to work with a couple of the folks who have really been pushing forward this work. Certainly Amy Margolis, who you'll hear from in a moment, as well as Prudence Fisher, as well as a whole team of folks who've been working with them over time. So I should, and I promised I wouldn't speak for too long, but I should start with a confession, which is that when I first sat down with Laura and Paula over lunch in the faculty club now probably 7 years ago or so, I had always been an NVLD skeptic. And that dated back to my time as a child and adolescent psychiatry fellow, when I had cared for a young man who had a diagnosis of, actually quite a number of diagnoses, but a recent diagnosis of NVLD. And my attending psychiatrist at the time was rather incredulous about this. And I said, well, what is NVLD? And he says, well, it's whatever that person wrote in their report. And this is actually, unfortunately, quite common for people who even reach somebody who does an assessment that could make a diagnosis of NVLD. I was talking earlier with Pierre, I don't know where Pierre went, I didn't get Pierre's last, thank you, Pierre, about how awareness of NVLD has spread over time, oftentimes by word of mouth, personal connection, somebody meeting somebody with a diagnosis and saying, oh, I have seen a handful of other people who are struggling in this same way. But it hasn't spread the way that we expect these things to spread, which is rigorous definition of a condition followed by verification, establishing reliability, establishing validity, and actually having something to offer that people can understand and work with. And so I guess I'll highlight 3 people briefly. Laura convinced me that this was something important enough to keep talking about, and also convinced me to listen to some of the folks doing work already in this area. Laura, for anyone who hasn't spent time with her, is a force of nature, and was persistent, recognized my skepticism or hesitance, but was persistent in helping me see that the desire here was to use rigorous science to push things forward, so that when you say NVLD, people actually know what it really means, as opposed to where things have been for quite a long time, where no one's entirely sure that this person is talking about the same thing as that person. And Amy's going to sort of speak for herself, but part of what convinced me was that Amy was, at the time, maybe a few years out of her postdoctoral research fellowship, and doing just amazing, rigorous work in this area, sort of by hook or by crook, finding a way to sneak NVLD into studies about other things, because NIH has never funded anything on NVLD. And Amy will tell you a little bit about what she's currently working on. And it's really remarkable to see over the course of something like 10, 12 years, Amy go from returning to research as somebody who'd already established herself as a very successful clinician and build up an area that people really hadn't been working on, which is really quite incredible. And as you just heard, is now a full professor at Ohio State and will soon be the star professor in endowed professorship, which is sort of the highest honor you get in the academic world. And then I got to know Prudence Fisher better over time, in part by understanding how she was applying much of what she's done actually throughout youth mental health, but applying a rigorous approach to assessment, definition, careful, not what I heard about when I was seeing this young man in the inpatient unit, but a careful approach to establish consensus and make sure that that has reliability, meaning each clinician can apply the same criteria, and validity, meaning it describes what people are actually experiencing. And I will say over the last 6 years or so, I've seen this group pull together the leaders in the world in NVLD clinical work and research, but also the leaders in the world in youth mental health assessment, to say how can this be turned from a definition that people don't necessarily understand from person to person into something that could make it into the DSM. And I printed it out today. There's a paper that shortly will be accepted in the Journal of the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry that describes this whole process. And I had the opportunity to read through it today. Hillary is also an author on this paper, Amy, but with a lot of leadership from Prudence, and something that never would have happened without Laura's determination and fearsome persistence to pull people together and establish consensus, and then use careful, well-constructed surveys to both evaluate whether that describes what people with this diagnosis have experienced, what families see, and then importantly, whether clinicians can actually apply these criteria. Pretty remarkable work, and Amy will tell you a little bit about where things are going next, but I want to just pause again for a moment and give a hand to certainly Laura Lemle, but these 3 determined figures who are carrying this forward. And then pleased to hand off to Amy Margolis, who we don't get to see every day at Columbia anymore, but we'll continue collaborating with as long as we can.
Thank you, Jeremy, for that introduction. And it's great to see everyone here. It's great to see so many familiar faces and really a lot of new faces, as Laura said. And it's really an honor to get to speak to you about what we've been working on. We have so many exciting things happening. I'm thrilled to announce my role that I think Jeremy and Laura have both told you about, so I don't need to belabor that point, but I'm really, really excited to be joining at Child Mind Institute, where they have both world-class research and world-class clinicians and are really pushing the boundaries on changing things for children's mental health. And I think this partnership between the NVLD Project and Child Mind Institute is going to allow us to move into even greater spaces and climb higher mountains than the ones we set out to climb 12 years ago. Solidifying this next 5 years of partnership, the NVLD Project has made a super generous gift to support this work at Child Mind, and I need to say thank you to our founder, Laura, and to Paula and everyone, Samantha, who help us make this happen, and then to the Child Mind team for coming together and seeing the vision, and especially to Dr. Mike Milham, who's here, who, just go like this so people can see you, who has been also a mentor to me in addition to Jeremy along the way. And for those of you who are familiar with our old work, we published this first prevalence estimate of, which means like how common is NVLD, and Dr. Milham was the senior author on that, really pushed me. It was about 6 years ago we started that, right? And it was published in 2020. And for me, that was a really pivotal moment in my career. And so this is just wonderful coming together and moving forward. So as you heard from Jeremy, it's really important that we have a definition of NVLD so that we can move forward. And under Dr. Fisher's leadership, the DSM submission is moving along great. And she is spearheading several studies that I'm fortunate to get to work on with her, where we're addressing questions that the DSM committee put to us. And what this means is that our studies, what they want us to show in these studies, I think Jeremy touched on this, is that the definition can be used reliably by clinicians, and that the youth we identify are actually showing this clinical presentation that we've now come to understand as NVLD. So at Child Mind, we've been collecting data using a screener that Dr. Fisher and I created, and we mentioned Dr. Hillary Litwin is here representing the next generation of researchers in NVLD research and is doing a similar study at another clinic at Columbia. So we're really moving forward, all of us together, and we're hopeful that we'll have all these data and submit them and be favorably reviewed, and soon what we're calling DVSD/NVLD will be a recognized diagnosis. And I really, this would not have happened without Laura's vision, energy, and persistence, and I think that is what's worth like giving you a round of applause. Okay. Now I'll just take maybe one more minute and tell you what we're turning our full focus on. Our sort of lofty aspirational goals at Child Mind for DSM is to focus on treatment. And I'm going to continue doing that in partnership with my colleagues at Columbia, like Dr. Fisher, and also Dr. Alex Stranovsky, who's here somewhere. There he is. And that's the first project I'll talk about. We continue to push forward in our mission to develop a drug for NVLD. So we call this pharmacologic intervention, right? And what we're working on is a set of studies in mice that allow us to see that we have a drug that reverses some of the problems that Alex can induce, basically some NVLD-like problems in mice. And when we give them the drug, we reverse the problems. And so we need to find a little more funding and do a few more mouse studies, and then our next step will be to try this drug in adults. And the good news is it's already an approved compound, so we don't have to go through some of the problems that you might face trying to do a first clinical trial. So we're pretty hopeful that we can move that forward. And then our second focus is on cognitive and talk therapy. So I think there we have two things we're trying to do. One is figure out how psychotherapy works for people with NVLD. And our other young investigator who couldn't be here tonight because she's busy treating people is Dr. Mariah DeCeresi. And she published a paper last year about treating anxiety in NVLD. And we want to take those ideas and try and manualize them and test them out. And really that paper was about, I'm going to give you kind of a quick summary. We know that cognitive behavioral therapy is really effective for anxiety, but it dawned on me one day when I was thinking about how we treat people, relies a lot on visual spatial thinking. So we want people to understand, for example, I get anxious when this thing happens. That's cause and effect. And even for me to explain that concept to you, I'm going like this, because there's a spatial component to cause and effect. And so in this paper, we write about how do you take the spatial requirements out of cognitive behavioral therapy so that someone with NVLD can benefit the way everybody else can. And then the last really aspirational goal here is to try to come up with some brain-based therapies that are non-invasive. So we have something that Mike and I have been talking about for years, where we would love to take kids and put them in an MRI machine or some sort of neural feedback situation where we can train them, where we can give them exercises to do that will train their spatial circuit to work a little better, and maybe that will help their outcomes as well. So the goal with all these treatments is to improve the social and functional lives of kids with NVLD, and we hope to keep moving this forward. I think we have amazing partners on board between all of you who come, who are interested, who help support us in many, many ways. Not only money, but friendship, support, networking, connections, and then we have all of our intellectual partners, and of course, Laura. So thank you all.
Thank you, Amy. It's actually going to be impossible to follow up on the things that you talked about and make an impression on the room, but I'm just going to say that. So, yeah, yes, we do have a clinic. And in fact, I, again, need to say, I know this is a theme of tonight, the generosity of Dr. Laura Lemle. And I know it's funny, I woke up this morning thinking, why is this like so incredible what you're doing? I've been kind of so taken aback by the politics of society today and how we're so obsessed with the self and just what's good for ourselves and our own needs. And I realized this morning, like you're like the counterpoint to that. Like everything you do is about the other, you know? And I just felt like that was just so essential to say that. So Laura, you know, again, in this theme of Laura's energy and vision, so, you know, you heard it already now, like, so you've got the Child Mind Institute going with the clinical side, and then you have Amy and Prue doing research, and then, of course, she had to come to me. She's like, well, we need to train the next generation. That's you. Okay, yeah, I have a school. We have grad students. And so Laura comes to me and said, what are you going to do to train the next generation? How are you going to do that? And I'm like, well, that's brilliant. We have to do that. So Laura was generous enough to give us the funding to help establish a Lemle Clinic, the first focused on NVLD, DVSD on the East Coast. We're thrilled. We had a soft opening in the spring. This fall we had our official opening. Laura sadly was ill, could not attend, but she was there on the screen, and it was wonderful because we could all focus on her. Her son and her daughter were there to help with the ribbon cutting. We had representatives from the New York State representatives. We had the Bronx Borough President come, the councilwoman come. We had a lot of very interested local politicians in the Bronx, Ferkauf's in the Bronx, and the clinic opened. And we are very actively now training the next generation of grad students in doctoral and master's programs to learn to work with individuals with NVLD. I have to thank the people who make this happen for us. So Dr. Jill Brickman, who's here today, is our assessment supervisor for our students, who's working focus on NVLD. Dr. Mariah DeCirce, who could not be here tonight, is helping with our therapy work and supervising our students in therapy. Our clinic coordinator, Dr. Greg Enzina, is here, who's helping focus that. And of course, we've learned from the wisdom of Dr. Bill Salton, who runs our Parnes Clinic, which is, again, our large clinic in the Bronx as part of Ferkauf. And all these people have come together to help us work and train the next generation of students in working with individuals who have problems in mental health associated with NVLD, and also are coming to assessments to help us determine what some of their problems are. Again, this is a university-run clinic. It's a student clinic. It's a student-run clinic. And so we have very close supervision. Right now we're at a smaller caseload where we have an active caseload of about 10 individuals we're seeing for therapy and for assessment, but that will grow over time. We need more supervisors actually to help with that. Anybody here, let me know if you're available. And so we do want to build on that and grow our clinic and improve our training. We have work on NVLD embedded in our coursework. I'm thrilled to say that the Ferkauf Graduate School of Psychology is now also a New York State approved accreditor of continuing education. We'll be having continue ed programs. It's all going to be growing over time. We'll be developing certificate programs. So over time, we hope to get the word out, continue to train the next generation, and really we just see wonderful things happening in the future, and it couldn't be done without Laura's help. So thank you.
Thank you to all of our educational and research partners. We couldn't do this work without you. So big round of applause for all of you and the hard work you've been doing as well. I'm very excited to introduce Dr. Todd Cooperman, who is our newest member of the NVLD Project Board of Directors.
Put the back up again. So, I always look forward to this special night, as does my wife Sharon. We've been to every one of these, I believe, so far. Was this number 7 or 6? And the reason why I look forward to it, we look forward to it so much, is it's really the largest gathering in the world of people who want to make the world a better place for people with NVLD. This includes, obviously, people with NVLD, their family members, other people here, the researchers, the clinicians, and I hope all of you are taking full advantage of schmoozing and getting information and sharing information, with everyone here. It's really a very unique opportunity. If this is your first event, welcome to the tribe. NVLD can feel isolating, both for obviously someone with NVLD, for a family, but know that you have a home here. As we all know, NVLD is not always easy. It's a journey, but the NVLD project exists to make that journey easier. It's a wonderful mission, and as you well know, it could not have happened without Laura Lemle. One more round of applause for Laura. And as the newest member of the board of directors, part of my reason for speaking tonight is to ask for a wider financial support from our NVLD family. With more resources, we can get more done, we can get things done faster. I can tell you that the project itself has meant a great deal to my family. We were searching for an organization just like this when we got a diagnosis for one of our family members several years ago. We were searching all over, went online and saw the NVLD project, and I exclaimed to Sharon, you can't believe this. There's an organization actually doing all the things that we'd like to see done. So ever since then, we've been huge fans and supporters of the project. As you know, the project is working to get NVLD on the map, get it in the DSM, which requires extensive research. You've heard a lot about what's going on right now. And it's really, getting it in the DSM is the key to many great things, including wider recognition of NVLD, being able to apply for research grants from the government, which you can't get unless it's a real defined condition, easier reimbursement for professionals providing services. I'm not going to go through all the things the project is doing, because you've heard all the things the project is doing. They're quite amazing. Just reaching into every aspect of care and research. What wasn't mentioned is also the blog, which, little things, and Paul, thank you, and the staff for all you do to make things run. But, just the people who submit their own stories, researchers, people with NVLD, the NVLD ambassadors. We appreciate, you're posting those stories. Our family has benefited from the resources mentioned in many of those stories. So keep doing that. Thank you very much for those who contribute. And I know that many of you already give generously to the NVLD project, but if not, I encourage you to do so. Please ask others to contribute, family members, colleagues, friends, family. Donations are tax deductible. You can do it right online. You can send a check. You can transfer securities. Many of you may not know, but the project actually operates on a pretty shoestring budget. It's small staff. Rent, basic operational costs are really covered by Laura, which means that anything that you contribute goes right to all these activities that you want to see done, the research, the counseling, the diagnoses. So it's really like 100% of what you give is going to go right to helping people. So again, thank you all very much for being here tonight and for being part of the NVLD family. And thank you, Laura.
Our last speech tonight is from Miss Michaela Hearst, who has been working with the NVLD project since I started 7 years ago, and she was one of our very first project social ambassadors. She is also a clinical social worker, and I'm very excited to introduce her and for you all to meet her tonight. Welcome.
Good evening, everyone. Members of the board, esteemed colleagues, guests, thank you. I am elated to be here tonight. In November 2018, I spoke at the first annual NVLD Project Benefit Dinner cocktail party. I opened by quoting Albert Einstein's "Everyone is a genius, but if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will lead its whole life thinking it is stupid." Deja vu. When I was invited to be tonight's keynote speaker, I was filled with emotions. I try to practice what I preach, so I decided to truly feel my feelings. I was honored, anxious. What if I say the wrong thing? What if they don't think I'm funny? The latter two questions anxiously persisted throughout my childhood. 6 years ago, I was a graduate student at the Cooperman School of Social Work at Hunter College. I was less than a year away from graduating with my master's degree, an accomplishment that prior to college I never thought would have been mine. However, one thing that's remained the same. I still feel like that fish Einstein was referring to. I never quite felt like I belonged. I learned to read at 2.5 years old. I was the girl who wouldn't stop talking about her cat and always had her nose in a book. Granted, I still won't stop talking about my cat. And I'm a nerd for research articles and my childhood favorite books. I'm still that person. I'm still that little girl. I didn't always like her, but I like her a little bit more every day. I received the NVLD diagnosis in 2008 when I was 14 years old. Fast forward to 2024. I'm a clinical program therapist at a partial hospitalization program. I have a private practice on the side. For the past decade and a half, I've educated others about NVLD, including even mental health and medical professionals. As a child, it never should have been my job to educate others about my disability, but as an adult, I took this sort of education on as a career. At my previous job, I had one supervisor and mentor now ask me the question, how do you best receive information so that I can deliver it to you in an effective way? I was floored. No one had ever been so kind or understanding to me in a professional setting. I've been asked so many times what the source of my success is and how I found what worked for me as a 30-year-old with NVLD. The truth is, I don't always know the answer. My needs can shift from day to day. But one thing is certain, I do well in environments where people are innately kind and understanding. As an adult or former child with NVLD, I've ultimately had to learn what works for me and what doesn't. I need to write everything down and repeat back what someone has said to me so I can make sure I've understood it correctly. At work, I've had to train my brain to slow down and ensure I have all the pieces before taking further action. I have to do that in social situations too. I'd say it's accurate that I've overcome a fair amount of NVLD-related challenges. I got my driver's license when I was 22. Seriously, who let that happen? If you know me, you've likely heard me rant about how much I love my 2013 Honda Accord, just don't ask me to parallel park. Many students of all ages, diagnosed or undiagnosed, remain in the dark about their individual needs. That is why I became a clinical social worker and why I've chosen to be an advocate. my lived experience continues to propel me towards success. I've given my NVLD story to the world, and anything I've ever published was only a synopsis. I've changed over the years, and I've heard it said that when you share your story with the world, it's not yours anymore. I slightly disagree. My story unequivocally belongs to me, but pieces of it do belong to the world. My personal experience have shaped my professional identity as an advocate. I could delve into the research I've conducted and studied regarding homework and cognition. Less or none at all is more. The importance of recess and scheduled breaks for cognition, and how trauma-informed care should be at the forefront of the educational realm. I could write a dissertation on these topics. In fact, one day I hope to. Dr. Michaela, LICSW, is a nice ring to it. With the help of friends and family, both blood and chosen, I stand here today. I spent many years in the dark waiting for a light at the end of a long and winding tunnel. To this day, navigating the world and aspects of myself remains a challenge. I still spend time reminding myself that I am not less than my neurotypical cohort. All I've ever wanted was to be seen without having to explain myself. This is exactly the type of advocacy that the NVLD project embodies. This work is needed now more than ever. With the work this organization does in a perpetually changing society, I can honestly say that that light is brighter than ever now. So bright, I'll need to wear sunglasses for the rest of my life. Not too bad for a fish out of water. Thank you.